And Tu B'Av has to do with the Mila of the Beis Hamikdash. That's also the Mila that we have concerning the limit of Pnimius HaTorah, the Bayis Shlishi, and that is the advantage. That is the Mila of Tu B'Av, that Lo Yehayu Yom Tovim L'Yisrael Chamisha Asar B'Av. So we're going to explore this to be able to understand this a little bit more about the advantage of Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi, which Tu B'Av is about. We're going to explore this with understanding, first of all, the difference between the second Beis Hamikdash, and the first Beis Hamikdash. And from that, we will explore the idea further as it applies to the third Beis Hamikdash. Yuvin Ma'ilu Shabai Shein, Gavai Shlish will be understood the advantage of the second Beis Hamikdash over the first Beis Hamikdash. The feature because it was greater in it in years, like we said before. That the Navi says, God it'll be greater the glory of this final house than the first house. And it's going on the second Beis Hamikdash because the second Beis Hamikdash stood 10 years extra for 420 years instead of like the first Beis Hamikdash that only stood at 410 years. So the Rebbe asked an obvious question. Seemingly it's not all not understood. What's the reason that in the second Beis Hamikdash it says it'll be greater the glory of the latter house than the first? I have built for you a dwelling place, a home for you. So that's what the first Beis Hamikdash was described in Malachim, where it talks about the first Beis Hamikdash building, the completion of the Beis Hamikdash. Because it stood an extra 10 years, its glory will be greater than the first Beis Hamikdash. Zen movement misunderstood. The fact that it's greater in years, the fact that it stood 10 more years, it's not just 10 years. These 10 years are indicative of the entire time of the Beis Hamikdash. It indicates and shows the greatness in the effect of our actions and our service that was in this Beis Hamikdash, in the second Beis Hamikdash. And the Rebbe says a very interesting point, and that greatness of the service of the second Beis Hamikdash is not something that is manifest the final 10 years. When it reached 410 years, and now it had the extra 10, so that's when it was extra or better. No. In such a manner that already initially this latter Beis Hamikdash was, that it's greater, its glory than the first. Behind this means it doesn't mean that just at the end it was added to another 10 years. But the 410 years, that was before the last 10 years that it stood. They were the same. The first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash, rather already at the beginning, from the first day of the first year that the Beis Hamikdash stood, of the second Beis Hamikdash, it was that latter Beis Hamikdash, that its glory is greater than the first, meaning that latter Beis Hamikdash, from the moment it stood, was already greater than the first. Then move on. If that is so concerning the second Beis Hamikdash over the first Beis Hamikdash, this is understood in Kol Shkim V'Kal V'Chomer, Beis Hamikdash Shlishi. How much more so when we speak about the third Beis Hamikdash? Its advantage and quality over the first and second Beis Hamikdash. It's not just that the amount of years were added to it. And even in such a manner that includes the numbers of the years of the two houses, the two Batei Mikdashes together. So in other words, it's so many years, so it's not only 410, it's not only 420, but it's everlasting. So it has so much. But rather, it's an entirely different type of Beis Hamikdash. It was added to the third Beis Hamikdash, an entirely different type of category. An everlasting building in actuality and in a revealed way. The Rebbe says that in truth, we're saying, if you remember before we quoted from the Rambam that the Beis Hamikdash is a bayis la'olmei elamim, it's a building forever and ever, which is something that even applies to the first and second Beis Hamikdash, according to the simple reading of the Rambam. So what does it mean that over here we're saying that the third Beis Hamikdash was everlasting? So he's saying that's as far as being revealed. He says in the parentheses, though similar to this everlasting nature of the Beis Hamikdash was to be found in the first two Bate Mikdashes, that's the difference between the Beis Hamikdash. Even Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni over the Mishkan. The Mishkan was initially built to be a temporary home. The Beis Hamikdash was built to be a home forever and ever, but because of like external factors, if you will, it couldn't be. That also the first and second Beis Hamikdash are called the everlasting home of the Eibishter. Yet still in all the way the everlasting nature manifested itself in the first and second Beis Hamikdash. That was only potentially. As opposed to in actuality, in a revealed way, this idea of the everlasting nature of the Beis Hamikdash will be specifically in the third Beis Hamikdash. Like we said earlier, the difference between the final Beis Hamikdash and the earlier two is not, it reached the milestone, it passed 420 years, that's it. Now it's something greater. But the first 420 years of the third Beis Hamikdash will stand, it's not going to be any different. That then when they see that it exists another year after 420 years, or another 10 years after 420, 20 years, so then you'll see, now the third Beis Hamikdash is something different. But rather immediately in the first day, it's immediately an everlasting building. Similar to what the Alter Rebbe wrote. It says a day that's entirely long. It says about Mashiach's times that it's a day that's entirely long. So what does it mean? That's a day that's entirely long. Seemingly, the length of a day is at the end. Instead of going on X amount of hours, it will go on more than that amount of hours. So the Alter Rebbe in Torah explains, Yom Shekulei Aruch means its entirety is long, meaning its entirety is a great revelation. Its entirety has this great thing. Not when it comes 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, when it should have been dark, it's still light, for example. No, right away at the beginning, it's already powerful. That what does it mean that's entirely long? Not just after the 24 hours pass, it's still the very same day. Immediately at the beginning, it's long. Now the Rebbe is going to bring an example of this from a primary function of the Beis Hamikdash, like we brought down before, that the Beis Hamikdash is a place, like the Rambam says, ready, a home that's ready, that in which we should bring the karbanos. And so he's going to explain this, how we see that the karbanos are going to be of a totally different type. Immediately, from the first day that the Beis Hamikdash will stand, it's going to be a different type of carbon than was in the first or the second Beis Hamikdash. It's not like after 420 years, now the karbanos will be different. So to concerning the karbanos shadafka Beis Hamikdash shlishi specifically in the third Beis Hamikdash, you are karbanos kemitzvas ritzeinecha. The karbanos will be like the mitzvahs of your will, meaning that it says, we say this in Musaf, that the Eibusher should rebuild our Beis Hamikdash in Musaf and Shabbos. We should rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, and then we will do like the command of your will, meaning that up till now, even in the first Beis Hamikdash, even in the second Beis Hamikdash, it wasn't the ultimate way according to the Eibusher's will. meaning, of course, we followed all the instructions, of course, we followed all the halachas, but that the karbanos were not in the most perfect sense, in the most perfect state that the karbanos could be. How come? So we've spoken about this in different mamarim, and the Rebbe is going to be mentioned it in a short manner over here. Since the entire world will be in a perfect state, so because of that, the animals that will be offered on the Mizbeach will be the most perfect state of animal. The wine libations that they'll be offering on the Mizbeach, the yayin of the Nesachim, will also be in the most perfect way. And not only that, but there's different components in the carbon. There's not just the physical carbon, there's the person that offers the carbon. The Kohen, the Levim that participate, the Israel, the Chein Hashlemus, Shala Adam HaMakriv. So too, the person that will bring the karbanos, the people involved in the karbanos, they will also be in a more perfect state because of Mashiach's time. Along with the perfection of the home, the house, the Beis HaMikdash, that's ready to be offering it at the karbanos, an everlasting home. So he says a very interesting explanation, or he elaborates a little bit more on this. In the top of the next page, the idea behind this is the Beis HaMikdash Shlishi in the third Beis HaMikdash. They will offer the same karbanos that they brought in the Batei Mikdashes prior to that in general. The Rebbe is going to add now, yet there will be a little bit addition in the karbanos. Behind which af bishit twice the tfasful of as karbanos kadoshim, though in the time of the third Beis HaMikdash, there'll be added new karbanos. And the Rebbe brings something that the Rambam speaks about. It says that when the second Beis HaMikdash was built in the times of Ezra, so Ezra had instituted certain karbanos. They were considered like a miluyim, a makeup, let's say, for the karbanos that wasn't offered for the 70 years. But there were new karbanos that were just brought initially or at that time. And this is similar to the fact that when they built the first Beis HaMikdash, there was also more karbanos and additional karbanos that they did not offer in the Mishkan that was in the Midbar. So the first Beis HaMikdash had additional karbanos that wasn't offered in the Midbar. The second Beis HaMikdash had additional karbanos that wasn't offered in the first Beis HaMikdash. And so too, Matzinu Kama Karbanos Nishkru B'Yechazkel B'Negel Beis HaMikdash Shlishi. We also find different karbanos, many karbanos that are mentioned in Yechezkel, speaking about the third Beis HaMikdash. The way it's indicated from the simple psukim, they were not there in the second Beis HaMikdash. So that's one thing about how you're going to see that. That's not one thing. That's despite the fact that in general the karbanos will all be the same. Yes, there'll be a little bit an additional karban. Still in all, the karban is the primary part of the karbanos. Beginning from the Talmud carbon. The one sheet that will be brought, you will make in the morning, and the one sheet, the second sheet, they will make in the evening or in the afternoon. With the carbon Talmud, you begin all the karbanos of the Beis HaMikdash. No carbon can be offered in the Beis HaMikdash before the carbon Talmud, and with the carbon Talmud in the afternoon is when you conclude after the carbon Talmud. No carbon is brought afterwards. One should not bring before the carbon Talmud, and one should not bring after the carbon Talmud anything. So the carbon Talmud was the same carbon Talmud in the Mishkan, the first Beis HaMikdash, and the second Beis HaMikdash, and seemingly so too will be in the third Beis HaMikdash. Yet despite that, Va'afal became still in all. The Dafka Beis HaMikdash Shlishi, specifically in the third Beis HaMikdash in the mitzvah Shenechad, will be like the mitzvahs of your will. Shloi Haya b'Mishkan Shor Midbar did not exist in the Mishkan that was in the Midbar. Afilu Loya Beis HaMikdash, not even in the first Beis HaMikdash. where over there, like we said, the first base of Mikdash was like the highest of the high. Even then, the way how we will offer up those karbanos will be of a totally different caliber. And also this idea that the karbanos will be committed to Senecha, will be of a completely different caliber when Mashiach will come. So he says it'll be in such a type of way that Shemiyad bekarban rishon sheyakriva b'yom rishon sheyibana b'mikdash b'kaymer. Immediately in the first carbon that they'll offer in the first day that the base of Mikdash will be built in its place, the mitzvah Senecha, they'll already be the quality and the advantage. They'll be like the mitzvahs of your will. Even Shemakriv Mois the base of Mikdash Nisri, since they're offering it in the everlasting base of Mikdash. Though it's only the first year of the base of Mikdash stand. As opposed to the first base of Mikdash only stood at 410 years, and the second base of Mikdash stood only 420. So it won't be that on the 421st year, that's when we'll see the shleimus or the karbanis in the third base of Mikdash. No. From day one, first carbon, immediately, the carbon will be of a totally different caliber. The same thing, the entire base of Mikdash, from day one, will be of an entire different caliber in the third base of Mikdash than the first two. So now he's going to bring back to what we were speaking about, name mitzvah v'torah oir v'derech hayim. How this is in our avodah of a yid. So in the service of a person, who the ultimate perfection of a service is when there's not only the idea that the mitzvah is a candle. What is the idea of a mitzvah being a candle? Mitzvahs are connected and limited according to the world. It's a manner of service that's connected with the existence of the world. Therefore, there are different limitations and measurements having to do with the world. In other words, when you have to perform the mitzvahs, certain mitzvahs are only done by day, certain mitzvahs have to be done only a certain time, certain mitzvahs have to be done only in a certain measure. They have all the limitations of the world because mitzvahs have to do with the world. This idea that it has the limitations of the world upon it is primarily connected with fulfilling mitzvahs. Let's explain the Tanya, like we see also simply in our own eyes. Every mitzvah is measured and bounded. Also, when we look at Torah as a mitzvah, the way it's one of the 248 positive commandments. Like even Tanya brings down concerning setting aside times for learning Torah. So he says each one has a different type of shear, a different type of measurement, how much time he is supposed to set aside depending upon his other obligations that he has to go to work, etc., etc. So that is mitzvah. Mitzvahs are connected with the world and therefore they are susceptible to the limitations of the world. In addition to this, there's idea of the Torah being light. The idea of light is that's beyond the limitations of the vessels. The same thing, the Torah by itself, even though I as a person can only learn Torah X amount of hours per day, or I'm only obligated to learn X amount of hours per day, the Torah itself has an infinite power to it. It's unlimited. It's a chavam and a yam, etc., etc. You can go above and beyond. It's not limited in the way that mitzvah is. That a mitzvah is physically limited. How much parshas you put in film, how many tzitzis you hang on a beged. Torah has no limitations within its very essence of what it is, because it's likened to oil, and oil is really beyond the limitations of the vessels. But beyond that, beyond Ner Mitzvah, beyond Torah oil, we said the idea of derech chai. The ultimate avodah is when it's beyond a boundary and beyond a measure. That's the idea with all your might, meaning going out of your limitations completely. When a person reaches a level of b'chol meidecha, then becomes an everlasting thing that changes do not apply. Al derech ha'inyan the mitzvah shenecha. Here, basically, shashlishi bayis nitzchi, similar to what we say about the shleimus of the idea, the perfection that will be when Mashiach comes, that it will be kemitzvah shenecha. Let's go on. Let's see if we finish the Maimer while it's too above this week. Okay, so the Rebbe goes on in Ois Hey. That's what it means that there were no Yom Tovim for Yidden, like the 15th of Av. It's a greater Yom Tov than all the Yom Tovim, even greater than Pesach and Sukkot. Why? Because on Tu B'Av L'Gishaz Meir Me'ein Hagili Del Asid She'ein By Hefsik. It shines on Tu B'Av, today's day. It shines similar to the revelation of Mashiach's times. That Mashiach's type of revelation is that it has no ceasing, it has no stop, totally unlimited. Higher than the revelations of the time of the first and second base of Mikdash that had a ceasing, had a stoppage to it. Therefore, it's a greater Yom Tov than the other Yom Tov. That's also the comparison and the common denominator between the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. The Mavur Maimer, like explained over there in the Maimer, the Rebbe Rashab from Tafresh the year Eter, both on the 15th of Av and on Yom Kippur, Malchus, which is our Shoirish, and where we get our chayes from, that goes up all the way to the level of Atik, the inner level of Kesef, and not just Atik, but the inner level of Atik. This is similar to Mashiach's time. When Mashiach comes, will be the main revelation of the inner level of Atik. Like it's brought down from Kabbalah. All the ascents, all the elevations that are these days are only in the external part of Atik. Only when Mashiach comes will be the ascent and the elevation in the inner level of Atik. The cell gam shebechamish asabav Yom Kippur. Benois Yisrael yoytes v'chayos bekram v'oimres. Kichu mikchem l'shushamayim cholum. That's why also on the 15th of and in Yom Kippur, the daughters, Jewish girls used to go out and dance in the vineyards, and they used to say, "Go take your purchase, go take your wife for the sake of heaven," and that is the idea of marriage. And what's the purpose of marriage? Until we'll have sons and daughters involved in Torah mitzvahs. The Inyan on the Suyim Dafka, this comes specifically through marriage. Also, the idea of marriage is connected to the future time, to Mashiach's times. Kidis and Medrash Rabbah, Parshas Boy, like it's brought down in Medrash Rabbah. These days, by Matan Torah, we were only the level of betrothal, only the level of Kedusha. But from Mashiach's times, it would be like a marriage, like going under the chuppah with the Eibush. This idea of Yom Kippur is similar to the future time, to Mashiach's times, because of how Malchus goes up all the way into Atik. Like we said before, the Tesvav B'Av is higher than the 15th of Tishrei. So therefore, the fact that Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur have a common denominator, so that aspect is not something that's connected to the 15th of Tishrei, or else, then it would be similar to each other. The fact that the 15th of Tishrei completes and ascends higher and is connected to the Yom Kippur is only in this idea of that it's the 10th of the month, and the number 10 shows on completion and perfection, and that completion and perfection has an ultimate perfection when it comes to the full moon. Then it's added an ascent in the 15th of it, when the moon is fullest. In addition to that, that it's the 10th of the month, and then there's the 15th of the month, and there's a Kaim Masira Bashla. In addition, on top of that, there's a totally different thing that doesn't become reflected in the 15th of Tishrei. There's the ascent of Malchus in Atik. This idea is only found in Yom Kippur. You do not have that at all in Sukkot on the 15th of Tishrei. Because why? If you say you do have it, so then the 15th of Av and the 15th of Tishrei would be on the same level. So then the 15th of Av would not have had an advantage over the 15th of Tishrei. What we said before, that on the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, there's also now similar to Mashiach's times. There's similar to this in the general avoid of the person, which is made up of the different things. We said there's Neir mitzvah that the person does, there's the Torah or that the mitzvah does, and there's the derech chaim. In other words, mitzvahs that he does, the Torah that he learns, and the pnimius Torah that he studies. So he says, the main idea of the pnimius Torah, which is called derech chaim, the way of life, because it has to do with eitz chaim. That's going to be when Mashiach comes. Is going to be the time of the eitz chaim. But if you go and you look in Kuntas Eitz Chaim, over there, like we said, it's a directive. We need to be involved in Pnimis HaTorah now. It's not just about the future. It's not just now we're doing Neir Mitzvah Torah, and later when Mashiach comes, it's going to be Derech Chaim. He says, Derech Chaim, in Kuntas Eitz Chaim, the Rebbe Rashab explains that the Derech Chaim and Tchachas Musar is not just something that's connected to the time of Mashiach's times. Now has to be the avodah, not just of the mitzvah being a candle, and the Torah being the light. There also has to be this derech chaim, that is the idea of the study of the inner part of the Torah. So now the Rebbe adds another component. Not only do we have to do all three, but in every one there is all three of the other. All of the other ones. So too in all the specific matters of the mitzvah and the Torah and the way of life. And each one of them there's these three matters. It's included also the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It's one of the mitzvahs. Torah, it has to be the idea of in the Neir mitzvah, you have to have the Torah because one of the mitzvahs is to learn Torah. So therefore you have the Torah in mitzvahs. Kein mitzvah tshuva, which maybe had more zaken begeres tshuva, but turpsak dim the game mitzvah tshuva na Torah. So tshuva, which is higher than mitzvahs and higher than Torah, and tshuva has to do with Mashiach's times. As lots of tzaddikai b'tiyufta, he's going to bring tzaddikim to do tshuva. It's a combination of the avodah of Baal tshuva and tzaddikim. So even tshuva, which is the chaim techachas musar, is also a mitzvah. So therefore, it's connected to Neir mitzvah. So we have in the Neir mitzvah, we have the Torah, and we have the derech chaim, which is connected with tshuva. Derech chaim techachas musar. Same thing when we talk about Torah. Torah nichol gam inyan mitzvah shari limna Torah mitzvah kanal. Like we said before, Torah study is a mitzvah also. So in Torah there's the Neir mitzvah. Gam inyan tshuva, and also there's tshuva included in the level of Torah. Baruch begeres tshuva, like to explain that length. Begeres tshuva. Tshuva low in limna Torah. The higher level of tshuva is not about charot ala or kabbalah ala haba, but it's about if you used to study one pedic, you should study two prakim. If you used to study one daf, you should study two daf. That is the idea of tshuva ilah. So we see how tshuva is a part of Torah as well. The Pratius Yoisa, and even more specifically, in the Bechol mitzvah, there are in every mitzvah that we do, there's the three components of the mitzvah. Yeshna mitzvah, kvishi, neir mitzvah. Mitzvah, and then there's kvishi Torah. There's the component of the mitzvah, which is a Torah. What is the Torah component on the of the mitzvah? So he says, Nois of al pashas inyan kechol and yon maruchim shetzarach liyas ba'ifin shal ramzach upon him benigla. In addition to the simple aspect, that all spiritual aspects has to be at least hinted in the revealed part of the Torah. That whoever is involved in the Torah of the carbon oil, it's as if you offer an oil. So that we see that part of mitzvah is the Torah study. Through studying the laws of the carbon oil. So with that, we're fulfilling the mitzvah of the carbon oil. Then there's the mitzvah kifishi tshuva derechayim. There's the mitzvah, the way it's a way of a path of life. What does it mean? We said derechayim means that it's unlimited, even though a mitzvah has limitations. So what's the unlimited nature of the mitzvahs? It says shu inin ablig wolf's idea of being without boundaries. Maybe mitzvah film, for example, the mitzvah film. It's supposed to say that the entire Torah was likened to tefillin. Though the tefillin themselves are measured and bounded. Parshas, there have to be 4 chambers and 4 parshas inserted in those 4 chambers. From the Baal Toisa, Baal Tigran, in such a way you're not supposed to add and not supposed to detract. You can't make 5 chambers or 5 parshas or not less than the 4. Through the mitzvah of tefillin that's limited, we affect something that's beyond measure and boundary. How does he affect that's beyond measure and boundary? By using the tefillin as a springboard for shibud hamayach, through subjugating his heart and his brain. Part of the mitzvah of tefillin is to have the intention, like it says in the Siddur, that I'm giving over my heart and the mind to the Eibishter. It's without measure and boundary, but the way how he subjugates and sublimates his mind and heart to the Eibishter is without measure and boundary. So you have the infinite in the mitzvah. In other words, the derech hayim, which is about the infinite, you have it even in the ner mitzvah. You have all these 3 things in Torah. Torah, he mitzvah, the way the Torah is a mitzvah, every single part of Torah. It also has this idea of going beyond boundaries, like we said. There's these 3 things in the Pnimius HaTorah. The way, the path of life, the way the study of the inner part of the Torah permeates the mitzvah, the way it permeates and comes down in Torah study. The way it's a way for its own, doesn't mean a way for its own. So that the path, the going in the path of life is not just so my Torah study should be better, so my performance of mitzvah should be better, but it's the study of the inner part of the Torah for its own sake. Okay, let's pull this through to the end. Zem movement. This is understood. The beginning of this is applicable even in the double and quadruple darkness of the Golus, the Mashiach at the heels of Mashiach. Even outside of Israel, where we do not have the base of Mikdash. It's not even applicable, it's not even possible to have a base of Mikdash. Through each and every Yid, fulfilling one mitzvah. B'maisa in action, or a mitzvah he fulfills in speech, or he fulfills one mitzvah in thought. He does so with earnestness, and he does it in a simplicity. Because this Yid is doing it in a simple way, because he's not shaykh to great spiritual levels. Or perhaps he does do it with intentions. If intentions and meanings of the mitzvahs are something that's applicable to him. Or if it's in a manner that his kavanas are, my kavana is like a child's kavana, that I'm serving Hashem. Maybe as a machzedek b'sefer mitzvah straight from tzatfilah, like the machzedek writes in that tzedek straight from tzatfilah, that when a person does mitzvahs and he doesn't know the kavanas, so he just thinks, I am doing the kavanas like a child. Or like some did so even when they knew the kavanas. My kavanah is just to do it like a child does it, because Hashem wanted me to do it. So when he does a mitzvah in such a manner, with complete earnestness and simplicity, he has the capability to place himself, Ibrish tells it, in 1 hour, 1 moment, 1 day. In such a state and situation, she's a nasa by that it becomes an everlasting thing. Because the truth is, this unity is everlasting forever. Like we had, that whatever a person does down here, even though in this world it might be just for 5 minutes, but in the spiritual realms it's forever. We only have to draw it down in a way that it permeates the person. So then, when he does it, it's an everlasting action. At least in that 1 hour and 1 moment of the doing, how much more so when he continues with this throughout the days of the year. He is involved in the mitzvahs in such a manner, whether it's the mitzvah being a candle or the Torah being a light, or whether we're talking about the path of life. Then he continues and brings the everlasting Beis Hamikdash and the everlasting redemption. Yaviv will come and redeem us. Will lead us upright to our land of Mamash speedily in our day. Mamash.